The Arizona sun blazed down without mercy, burning the land until it shimmered. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Clara Boone staggered before finally collapsing beneath the brittle shade of a dying cottonwood tree. Her lips were cracked and dry, her voice gone. 4 long days without real food had left her hollow, almost ghost-like. She had run from San Francisco with nothing but the dress on her back and a small locket holding her mother's picture. 3 days earlier, stagecoach bandits had stripped her of the little she had left. Now, in the year 1875, miles from any soul, and with nothing but desert stretching endlessly around her, Clara closed her eyes and waited for death to finish what hunger and thirst had begun. The steady rhythm of hooves pulled her back from the edge. Through dust-caked lashes, she glimpsed a tall man sliding down from a chestnut stallion. His weathered face leaned close lines carved deep by years under the western sky. "Miss, can you hear me?" His tone was firm yet gentle, the kind of voice used to being obeyed. Clara managed only the weakest nod. The stranger pulled the cork from a canteen. "Easy now. Just a sip or two. Too much will make you sick." Cool water touched her lips, and Clara drank, as though life itself was flowing back into her veins. His steady hands supported her head, rationing each swallow. "Name's Jesse Callahan," he said after a moment, easing back on his heels. "Most folks just call me Callahan. My place is a few miles east." His sage-green eyes studied her carefully, the way a man with experience sizes up trouble. "You're half-starved, miss. Can you tell me your name?" Clara tried, but her voice rasped out uselessly. Jesse nodded, understanding. From his saddlebag, he drew a pouch, tore off a piece of jerky, and pressed it to her lips. "Let it soften. Take it slow. Chew when you're ready." She accepted, too weak to question, while he cast a watchful eye across the barren stretch. "Don't know what sent you out here alone," he muttered, "but you're mighty lucky I decided to ride this trail today." As the desert shadows thickened, Clara felt herself lifted into strong arms. The last thing she remembered was being carried against a chest smelling of leather sage and horse, while his low voice whispered, "I've got you now. You're mine to look after." When she woke again, a fire crackled nearby, and the aroma of stew filled her lungs. Her body still ached, but thirst and hunger no longer clawed at her so fiercely. She lay under a patched quilt of denim and flannel in a modest cabin. "You're awake!" Jesse's voice came from across the room. He approached, holding a steaming mug. "You've been out near 20 hours. Try some broth." Clara struggled to sit, her arms trembling. Without hesitation, Jesse slid an arm behind her shoulders and helped her upright. "Thank you," she whispered hoarsely. "I'm Clara Boone." He nodded and raised the mug to her lips. "Slow, Miss Boone. Let your body remember what food feels like." The simple chicken broth tasted like heaven itself. Jesse rationed each sip, pulling it away before she could take too much. "This ranch ain't much," he said, glancing around the sparse room. "Just me and a couple of hands running cattle on 500 acres. Not rich, but we manage." Clara noticed the plain stone fireplace, the mismatched furniture, the faded curtains, a home built more for survival than for show. Still, it was clean, warm, steady. "Where am I?" she whispered. "About 30 miles southeast of Tucson," he replied. Then, after a pause, "A lady doesn't end up starving in Rattlesnake Pass without a story." Memories cut sharp through her, and she tensed. Jesse caught the look, then shook his head. "No need for that now. Rest is what you need." He set the mug aside. "I sent Diego Cruz to fetch Mrs. Agnes Whitlow from the next ranch over. Wouldn't be proper to keep you here alone. She'll be along by nightfall." The thought of a stranger worrying about her reputation here in the middle of nowhere touched Clara more than she expected. "I don't know how to thank you, Mr. Callahan. Jesse's fine. And there's no need. Where I come from, when you find someone in need, they're yours to protect. You're under my care now, Clara Boone. At least until you're strong enough to decide your path." The words, plain and steady, stirred tears she hadn't felt in years. He looked away, stoking the fire, pretending not to see. "Rest now. We'll talk when you've got strength back." She drifted off again, his promise echoing in her mind under my care. For the first time in years, she felt safe. Days passed, a routine forming. Agnes Whitlow, a plump widow with iron-gray hair and warm eyes, arrived with a carpet bag and quickly took charge. Jesse cooked plain meals, barley broth, soft eggs, stewed apples, and carried them to Clara's bedside, feeding her when her hands shook too hard. "One more bite," he urged gently, never wavering. "You're stronger every day." By the 5th day, Clara managed to sit up and feed herself, though Jesse still hovered watchful, ready. Agnes Whitlow had washed and mended Clara Boone's travel-worn dress, but it still hung loose on her frame like cloth draped over a scarecrow. "You've wasted away too much, child," Agnes clucked, eyes sharp but kind. "We've got to put some meat back on those bones." Jesse Callahan leaned against the doorframe, his arms folded across his broad chest. "Mrs. Whitlow's right. You're still too thin." His sage-colored eyes were filled with real worry. "I'm riding into town for supplies tomorrow. I'll bring back some fabric so Mrs. Whitlow can make you a proper dress or two." Clara started to protest, but Jesse silenced her with a small shake of his head. "You need clothes that fit. Consider it part of getting well." That evening, Clara sat in a creaking rocker near the fire, watching Agnes knit, while Jesse methodically cleaned his revolver. Strength had begun creeping back into her limbs enough to make her want to speak. "I came west from Boston after my father, James Boone, passed away last year," she began softly. "He left debts behind, and the bank took our home. My uncle in San Francisco, Elias Whitmore, offered to take me in." Jesse's hands stilled over the gun as he listened, his gaze fixed on her. "When I arrived," Clara continued, fingers twisting in her lap, "I discovered his offer wasn't kindness. He'd arranged for me to marry Grant Maddox, 3 times my age, with a cruel history toward his wives." Agnes made a sympathetic sound, but Jesse stayed silent, his expression unreadable. "I refused. My uncle threatened to throw me out, so I fled in the night with what little I'd saved from teaching." Her voice trembled. 3 days into the journey, bandits hit our stagecoach. Took everything, money, trunk, food, even water. When the coach reached Silver Creek, I couldn't afford to go farther. "So you started walking?" Jesse said tightly. Clara nodded. "I thought I could reach Tucson on foot. Folks said it was only a few days' journey." She let out a bitter laugh. "I underestimated the desert." "What were your plans once you reached Tucson?" Agnes asked gently. "I'm a trained teacher. I hoped to find a school or maybe work as a governess." Clara sighed. "All my references were in that trunk, probably decorating some outlaw's camp now." Jesse snapped his revolver back together with practiced ease. "Tucson's growing fast. They're always looking for someone to teach their young'uns." He holstered the weapon and leveled his gaze at her. "But you're not going anywhere until you're fully recovered. Could be weeks yet. I don't want to impose." "It's not an imposition," Jesse cut her off. "You're staying here until you're strong enough. That's final." There was something in his voice beyond stubbornness, something protective that unsettled her, even as it soothed. Agnes glanced between them with a knowing smile. "Mr. Callahan's right, dear. Winter's closing in. Travel won't be easy till spring." Clara looked from one to the other and finally nodded. Thank you, both of you. Later, after Agnes had retired to the small room Jesse had built for her, Clara found herself alone with the rancher for the first time. "Does your uncle know where you were heading?" Jesse asked abruptly. Clara shook her head. "I told no one." "Good," Jesse said with a nod of satisfaction. "Then you're safe here." That simple statement warmed her more than the fire. "May I ask you something?" He tilted his head. "Sure. Why did you help me? You could have left me for someone else to find, or just given me water and pointed me toward town." Jesse stared at the flames for a long moment. 6 years ago, I found my kid brother in near the same state you were in," he said quietly. "He'd been thrown in a storm wandered days. By the time I got to him..." He trailed off and cleared his throat. "I was too late." "I'm so sorry," Clara whispered. He shrugged, but it didn't hide the ache in his eyes. "I swore I'd never pass by someone in need again. When I saw you under that cottonwood half dead, you became mine to save." The fierce note in his voice should have frightened her, but instead it sent a strange flutter through her chest. And now he added simply, "You're mine to protect at least until you don't need it anymore." That night, as she drifted to sleep, his words echoed in her mind, "Mine to protect." She wondered why the thought of someday no longer needing that protection felt so empty. Weeks rolled by, and her strength returned. Her cheeks filled out, and the dresses Agnes stitched from the fabric Jesse brought back from town began to fit. By early December, Clara was strong enough to help with light chores around the cabin, much to Jesse's initial protest. "You're still recovering," he said, catching her kneading bread dough one morning. "I've been here nearly a month," Clara countered. "I can't keep being a burden. You're not a burden." "Then let me help," she insisted. "I've never been idle in my life, Jesse. It doesn't sit right with me." Something in Clara Boone's steady gaze must have convinced him, because Jesse Callahan finally gave a reluctant nod. "As you wish, but nothing too heavy." By December, Clara had slipped easily into the rhythm of ranch life. She took over the cooking. Jesse's meals were plain and filling, but hardly imaginative. She learned soap making from Agnes Whitlow stirring lye and rendered fat by the fire. In the evenings, she sat with Diego Cruz and Martín Cruz, teaching them their letters and numbers by lamplight. Jesse watched all of it in quiet silence, though pride flickered in his eyes. The woman who had come to him half dead was now alive with energy, her laughter echoing in rooms long used to silence. One stormy night, as wind beat against the walls, Clara sat by the hearth darning one of Jesse's socks. Agnes had retired early, leaving them in the hush of firelight. "I got a letter from the school board in Tucson today," Jesse said suddenly. Clara's hands stilled needle mid-stitch. "Oh, they're looking for a teacher after the new year. The schoolmarm's marrying and moving on to California." His tone was carefully neutral. Clara swallowed. "And you told them that we had a teacher here." Her voice faltered. "You did." Gratitude warred with a hollow ache inside her. "It's what you wanted, isn't it? A teaching post." Jesse jabbed at the fire, his face turned away. "Yes. Of course." Clara bent again to her darning, though her stitches grew uneven. "It was thoughtful of you. They'd give you a room, meals, a small salary. You'd have independence." That word had always been her dream. Now it rang strangely empty. When would they need an answer? Soon. "They want you there by January 10th. Jesse finally met her gaze, unreadable in the shifting glow. "I can take you into town next week to meet them." Clara nodded, though her chest tightened. That would be practical. The silence that followed was thick, broken only by wind rattling the shutters. At last, Jesse rose abruptly. "I'd better check the horses. Storm's spooking them." Before she could answer, he pulled on his coat and stepped out into the night, leaving Clara staring after him, her victory suddenly feeling like loss. The trip to Tucson took a full day, Jesse driving the wagon while Clara sat bundled beside him against the winter cold. Agnes stayed behind, insisting the journey was too hard on her bones. With a knowing smile, she'd added, "You two don't need an old hen clucking over you every mile." Jesse booked rooms at the Arizona Hotel, separate chambers, with a connecting door left firmly locked for decency's sake. The school board would meet her the next morning. Clara's wide eyes drank in the bustling town wagons, rattling past storefronts trimmed for Christmas cowboys and miners pushing through swinging saloon doors to escape the cold. "It's changed since I last came through," she murmured. Jesse nodded. "Town's growing quick. Railroad's coming next year, they say." He guided the team toward the Adobe Hotel, Tucson's finest. After securing their rooms, Jesse suggested supper in the dining hall. "You'll want rest before tomorrow," he said, as they sat at a table set with linen. Clara studied the menu, feigning interest, while her heart knotted tighter. The ride had been filled with polite talk, but beneath it lay the unspoken truth that this journey marked the end of her time under his roof. At last, she set down the menu. "Jesse, I want to thank you for everything." His jaw tightened. "No need." "There is," she pressed softly. "You saved my life. You and Agnes nursed me back to health. You gave me a roof, food, clothing, and now I'm giving you your independence," he cut in his voice, rough. "Just like you wanted." The words struck her like a blow. "Yes," she whispered. "Just as I wanted." The food came then, sparing them from more words, but each bite tasted like ash. Afterward, Jesse walked her to her door, his manner formal. "Lobby at 8 tomorrow. The board meets you at 9. "Jesse, wait." She caught his sleeve. "Are you angry with me?" His expression softened. "No, Clara. Not angry. I always knew you wouldn't stay forever." "But something feels different," she said quietly. He raked a hand through his hair and sighed. "Get some rest. Tomorrow's a big day." Before she could press further, he turned down the hall, leaving her with an ache that went deeper than any hunger she'd once known. The next morning, 5 stern faces awaited her, 3 men and 2 women. Without her references, Clara relied on wit and memory to prove herself. "And you taught at Blackburn Academy for Young Ladies in Boston?" asked Silas Rourke, the board president. "For 3 years," Clara confirmed steadily. "I specialized in literature and mathematics," Clara Boone explained steadily. Martha Pike, a sharp-faced woman peering over her spectacles, frowned. "Our children need the basics reading, writing, arithmetic, not fancy words or Shakespeare." Clara kept her calm. "I assure you, Mrs. Pike, I can teach the fundamentals. But stories and literature stretch young minds, show them there's more beyond this frontier. Isn't that part of an education, too?" For over an hour, the board pressed her discipline methods, lesson plans, how she'd handle rowdy boys or timid girls. Clara answered each with quiet composure, though her heart beat faster every time her eyes strayed to the back of the room, where Jesse Callahan stood silent, watchful, unreadable. At last, Silas Rourke cleared his throat. "Well, Miss Boone, your training and outlook are satisfactory. The position pays $30 a month, includes room and board at Edith McGraw's boarding house. 27 pupils, ages 6 to 16. Clara nodded, trying to summon enthusiasm. "That sounds fair." "You'd begin January 10th, Martha Pike added crisply. "I understand," Clara said, her voice even though her chest felt hollow. Silas Rourke glanced at the others, who nodded in turn. "Then, if you're agreeable, the position is yours." Clara forced a smile. "Thank you. I'm honored." One by one, the members filed out, offering stiff handshakes and polite congratulations. Clara remained seated, a strange emptiness spreading through her chest. This was what she had come west for: independence, respectability. So why did it feel like loss instead of triumph? Jesse finally stepped forward, his tone clipped and formal. "Congratulations, Miss Boone. You've secured your future." "Thank you, Mr. Callahan," she replied in the same measured voice. "I couldn't have done it without your help." Something flickered in his eyes, pain maybe, or resignation before he shuttered it away. "I have business in town. I'll meet you at the hotel for dinner." She watched him walk out, his shoulders stiff beneath his coat. Only then did Clara admit the truth that had been gnawing at her for weeks. She didn't want to leave his ranch. She didn't want to leave him. Somehow, without her realizing, the quiet cowboy who had saved her life had become her very heart. But Jesse had made his stance clear. He had only ever meant to help her find independence. Whatever had grown between them, well, that was hers alone to carry. Clara drifted through Tucson's streets, trying to picture herself teaching children living at Edith McGraw's boarding house. The image refused to take shape. Instead, she saw Jesse's cabin, Agnes Whitlow, humming the warmth of belonging. By the time she returned to the hotel, she'd made up her mind. She wouldn't take the job. She would go back to the ranch, find another way to stay, even if it meant offering to be Jesse's housekeeper or teaching neighboring ranch children. But her resolve shattered the moment she stepped into the lobby. Jesse stood near the desk, deep in conversation with a striking woman in an elegant traveling suit. She laughed lightly, her gloved hand resting on his arm, and Jesse smiled, truly smiled down at her. Clara froze. She had only seen that smile a handful of times. "Ah, Miss Boone, the clerk," Roy Cutter called out. "Mr. Callahan was just asking after you." Jesse turned, his smile fading when he saw her. "Clara, allow me to introduce Lydia Mercer, an old friend from Texas." Lydia extended a gloved hand, her smile dazzling. "So pleased to meet you, Miss Boone. Thomas has been telling me how he saved you. Such a heroic tale, Thomas. No one called him Thomas. No one Clara had met anyway." "Miss Mercer," Clara managed, taking her hand with numb fingers. "How do you two know each other?" Lydia laughed musically. "Why, Thomas and I grew up side by side on neighboring ranches. Our fathers always hoped—" She trailed off with a knowing glance at Jesse, who shifted uneasily. "Her father just bought the old Sanderson place," Jesse explained quickly. "She's here to oversee renovations before the family settles in." "How wonderful," Clara said, though her resolve crumbled. Of course, Jesse would have ties to people like Lydia Mercer, elegant, polished, calling him Thomas, as though she had every right. "If you'll excuse me, I should freshen up before dinner." She fled upstairs, shutting her door behind her before tears could spill. Foolish, she thought. Foolish to believe Jesse's kindness was anything more. He had saved her, nursed her, helped her find work. He would have done the same for any soul in need. Splashing cold water on her face, Clara steeled herself. She would accept the teaching position. Jesse deserved his life back, free from an unwanted houseguest, especially now that Lydia Mercer had returned to Tucson. Dinner that night was torture. Lydia joined them, recounting childhood escapades with Jesse, her hand brushing his arm as she laughed. And Jesse stoic, silent. Jesse seemed more alive than Clara had ever seen him, chuckling at Lydia's stories, filling in the details she left out. Thomas was always the serious one, Lydia teased, smiling fondly at him. Even as a boy, Jesse always carried more weight on his shoulders than most men do grown, Clara Boone said quietly. Lydia Mercer's eyes sharpened, her smile. "Cool. And how long have you been staying at Jesse's ranch?" "Miss Boone." "Just over a month." Clara answered, painfully aware how her presence might look to an outsider. Agnes Whitlow has been there as a chaperone, of course. Of course, Lydia echoed, though her tone carried the faintest edge of doubt. And now you're to be Tuckson's new schoolteacher. How thrilling for you. Yes, Clara murmured, keeping her gaze from Jesse's. Very thrilling. After supper, Jesse walked both women upstairs, leaving Lydia first. Her parting words floated down the hall like perfume. I'll see you tomorrow, Jesse. So much more to catch up on. At Clara's door, Jesse hesitated. Lydia can be a bit much at first. We've known each other since we were kids. She seems lovely, Clara replied automatically. You make a handsome couple. His brows shot up. We're not a couple? But she clearly hopes for that, Clara said softly. A muscle worked in Jesse's jaw. Lydia's always had expectations. Doesn't mean I share them. Hope sparked in Clara's chest, but she crushed it quickly. It's none of my business. I'll stay here in Tucson. You'll return to your ranch. Our paths are splitting. Jesse studied her intently. Is that what you want, Clara, for our paths to split? Her heart screamed no, but Lydia's melodic laugh drifted down the corridor, stealing her courage. I think it's for the best, she whispered. You've done more than enough for me already. Something in Jesse's eyes hardened. He gave a short nod. I'll bring your belongings from the ranch when I come back next week. Good night, Miss Boone. His boots rang sharply against the wooden floor as he strode away. Clara stepped inside, shut the door, and sank onto the bed. At last, tears broke free. She'd just cut herself off from the one bond that had come to mean everything. Morning dawned cold and bright. Clara packed her meager belongings with mechanical hands, preparing to move into Edith McGraw's boarding house until her teaching post began in January. The night before, she had forced herself to write the letter of acceptance to the school board, though her thoughts had circled Jesse and Lydia endlessly. A knock startled her. Expecting Jesse, she opened the door to find Agnes Whitlow bundled in a heavy shawl, cheeks ruddy with irritation. Mrs. Whitlow. What on earth? That mule-headed man sent Diego Cruz to fetch me at daybreak, Agnes huffed, marching past her. Said I was needed in town. Froze half to death on that wagon. Jesse sent for you. Why, Agnes fixed her with a piercing stare. Didn't say much. Just muttered something about women being impossible to understand and stomped off to the livery. My guess he wanted me to talk some sense into you. Clara sank onto the bed. I don't understand. Don't you? Agnes sat beside her, took her cold hands in her warm ones. Child, that man's been half in love with you since the day he carried you across his threshold. Anyone with eyes can see it. And unless I'm blind, you feel the same. Clara's cheeks flamed. It doesn't matter. He only helped me out of duty. And now he's reunited with Lydia Mercer. Pah! Agnes waved a hand. That girl's been chasing Jesse Callahan since they were 16, and he's never looked her way. If he wanted her, he'd have had her long ago. But last night they seemed... Clara faltered. Comfortable. Of course they are. They've known each other their whole lives. Doesn't mean his heart lies with her. Agnes squeezed her hands. Tell me true. Do you want to stay in Tucson and teach, or do you want to go back to the ranch? Clara swallowed hard. I want to go back, she admitted. But I can't lean on Jesse forever. I have to stand on my own. Agnes's stern features softened. Ever think maybe there's a way back to that ranch that doesn't mean you're just a guest or a hand? The man's in love with you. He's just too stubborn to admit it, convinced you want your independence more than anything. Agnes stood tugging her shawl tighter. Now I'm going to find some breakfast. You'd best think on what you really want, child. When she left, Clara paced the room, her thoughts tumbling. Could Agnes be right? Could Jesse's feelings be deeper than duty? The answer came clear as daylight. He'd respected her wish for independence, never pressing, only helping her toward it. Just as she'd hidden her own heart, he had hidden his. Her pulse raced as she grabbed her shawl and hurried out. She had to find him, had to speak before it was too late. But as she reached the lobby, she collided headlong into Lydia Mercer. Miss Boone, just the person I wanted to see. Lydia Mercer's smile was polished, but her eyes gave away something sharper. Might we have a word alone? Clara Boone wanted to decline, wanted to keep searching for Jesse Callahan, but courtesy held her tongue. Of course, Miss Mercer. They stepped to a quiet corner of the lobby. Lydia's pleasant mask fell away. I'll be direct. I've known Jesse nearly all my life, and I care for his well-being. As do I, Clara said evenly, matching her bluntness. Do you? Lydia arched a brow. Then you must realize why I find your arrangement troubling. A proper lady wouldn't stay under a bachelor's roof for weeks on end owing him so much. Clara stiffened. Agnes Whitlow has been there as a chaperone. Nothing improper has taken place. Perhaps not in form, Lydia conceded coolly. But you can't deny how it looks. Jesse's always been too soft-hearted, gathering up strays and lost causes. Her eyes flicked over Clara dismissively. It would be a shame if his generosity cost him his good name. The barb cut deep, but Clara held her ground. Jesse is a grown man. He decides for himself who he helps. Lydia leaned closer, her voice dropping. Let me be plain. Jesse Callahan bears one of the oldest ranching names in Texas. His father may have squandered fortune and land, forcing Jesse to start fresh here in Arizona, but he still has a legacy to uphold and a future to secure. That future lies with someone of his own standing, someone like me, not with a penniless drifter he found half dead in the desert. Clara felt the sting like a slap. Before she could speak, a voice thundered across the lobby. That's enough, Lydia. They turned. Jesse stood a few feet away, his face carved with anger. Lydia rallied first, her tone sliding back into sweetness. Jesse, I was only reminding Miss Boone how important family connections are. I heard you clear enough, Jesse cut her off coldly. Don't speak for me or my family again. Color rose in Lydia's cheeks. I only wanted what's best for you. No, Jesse said, voice sharp as a whip. You wanted what's best for yourself. Clara isn't some stray I took in out of pity. And my reputation is my own concern, not yours. Lydia's pride battled humiliation. She lifted her chin. I see I've overstepped. Excuse me. With a stiff nod to Clara, she swept away. When she was gone, Jesse turned back, his eyes softening. I'm sorry for that. Lydia's always been possessive of our friendship. There's no need to apologize, Clara said quietly, though Lydia's words still burned. She spoke some truths. Truths Jesse frowned. There was nothing true in what she said. Wasn't there? Clara's gaze fell. I owe you everything. You saved me, fed me, clothed me, and now you've found me work. I never did any of it expecting something back, Jesse said, frustration edging his voice. I know, Clara whispered. That makes it harder. You did it from kindness, from a sense of duty, and she faltered. Courage failing. Jesse stepped closer, eyes locked on hers. You, what? Clara. The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. But before she could answer, hotel manager Caleb Thornton approached. Pardon me, Mr. Callahan. Telegram for you. Urgent. Jesse tore open the message, his face darkening as he read. Clara rose. What is it? Trouble at the ranch, he said grimly. Rustlers hit last night. He crushed the paper in his fist. I need to ride back now. Clara's heart clenched. Of course. You should go. I'll have to leave at once. Agnes can stay with you until you're settled at Edith McGraw's place. That won't be necessary, Clara insisted. I can manage. Something flickered in his eyes. Disappointment, maybe, or resignation. As you wish. He reached into his coat and handed her an envelope. Clara stared at it, torn. She wanted to refuse to tell him she hadn't stayed by his side for money. But wasn't this what she had claimed? She wanted independence, a chance to stand alone. With numb fingers, she accepted. "Thank you." Jesse nodded once, curtly. "Goodbye, Clara. I hope you find success in your teaching." He turned to leave. Panic rose in her chest. "Jesse, wait." He paused, looked back, his expression unreadable. "Be careful," she managed. A ghost of a smile brushed his lips. "Always." Then he was gone, striding out through the hotel doors toward the livery. Clara stood rooted, the envelope heavy in her hand, unspoken words, heavier still. Moments later, Agnes Whitlow found her still staring at the door. "Where's Jesse gone?" she asked, taking in Clara's stricken face. "Back at the ranch, there's been trouble. Rustlers." Clara Boone's voice was steady now, her decision clear. She turned to Agnes Whitlow. "Mrs. Whitlow, I need your help." The widow studied her a moment, then gave a firm nod. "Whatever you need, child. I need to get back to the ranch." Agnes's eyes widened. "And what about the teaching post I'll write the school board and decline?" Clara said, each word filled with resolve. "Jesse left on an emergency, and too much was left unsaid between us. I can't let him believe I meant to stay here in Tucson when my heart's pulling me back to his ranch to him." A smile tugged at Agnes's lips. "Now that's the first sensible thing I've heard all day. But how do you expect we'll get there?" Jesse took the wagon. "We'll hire a driver," Clara replied, patting the envelope Jesse had pressed into her hand. "I have money now." "Good," Agnes said briskly. "I'll pack my things. You write that letter?" Within 2 hours, Clara had delivered her letter of regret to Silas Rourke, gathered her few belongings, and secured a driver. The man, a grizzled ex-cavalry scout named Harlan Briggs, warned them the journey wouldn't be easy. "Roads are rough, and if rustlers are prowling, we'll need to keep our eyes sharp," he cautioned as he helped them into his buckboard. "Just get us there, Mr. Briggs," Clara said, settling beside Agnes. "That's all that matters." As the wagon rattled out of Tucson, Clara's thoughts raced ahead. What would she say when she saw Jesse? How could she explain her change of heart without laying her soul bare? And what if Lydia Mercer had been right that she was nothing but trouble to him? Agnes seemed to sense her unease. "Quit fretting, child," the widow said. "Truth finds its way out when the time is right." Clara prayed she was right. With every mile she knew one thing with certainty: she could not bear to be parted from Jesse Callahan. The road proved even harsher than expected. Halfway there, a wheel snapped, forcing Harlan Briggs to patch it in the cold night air. By the time the wagon rolled toward Jesse's land, the sky was dark, lit only by a thin slice of moon. As they crested the last rise, Clara gasped. An orange glow painted the horizon. Smoke billowed into the sky. Fire Briggs cried, snapping the reins. The horses lunged forward. Clara's chest seized with fear. "Hurry, please." When they reached the yard, the sight tore at her heart. The small barn was an inferno, flames clawing skyward. Men dashed in and out of the glow, hauling water, shouting orders. And there, blackened with soot, voice booming over the roar, stood Jesse Callahan, driving the fight against the fire. The wagon had barely stopped when Clara leapt down, skirts gathered, running toward him. Agnes shouted after her, but Clara didn't pause, not when Jesse might be in danger. The cabin still stood untouched, though sparks leapt dangerously close. Jesse barked orders at Diego Cruz and Martine Cruz, who worked furiously at the pump to drench the cabin roof. Jesse Clara cried, her voice nearly swallowed by the blaze. He spun disbelief written across his face when he saw her. "Clara, what in God's name I came back," she said simply, breathless before him. For a heartbeat he stared as if she were a ghost. "You shouldn't be here, it's too dangerous. Neither should you. Yet here we are." Clara's eyes flicked to the burning barn. "What happened, rustlers?" he growled. "Stole a dozen head and torched the barn as they ran." He jerked his chin toward the cabin. "Get inside. I need to make sure this fire doesn't spread. Let me help." Clara. "I'm staying, Jesse." She met his gaze without flinching. "Not just tonight. For good, if you'll have me." For a moment, confusion and longing battled across his face. "But the teaching position, I turned it down," Clara said, stepping closer, her heart hammering. "My place is here, with you." The words hung between them, raw and true. But before Jesse could answer, the barn roof caved in with a deafening crash, sparks shooting skyward. The spell shattered. "We'll talk later," he promised, squeezing her hand before rushing back to the fight. "For now, get to the cabin." Clara obeyed, joining Agnes on the porch. Together they watched Jesse and his men fight until dawn. By morning, the barn was a charred ruin, but the cabin stood, and most of the herd had been spared. Inside, they gathered around the kitchen table, exhausted faces streaked with soot. Agnes set down coffee and bread, her hands still trembling. Diego and Martine soon excused themselves to check the cattle, leaving Clara and Jesse alone with Agnes. After a quiet moment, Agnes stood gathering plates. "I believe I'll take some rest. Fighting fire wears a body out even watching it." She shot Clara a pointed glance before retreating to her room. Left alone, Clara and Jesse faced one another across the table, the weight of the past 24 hours heavy in the silence. "You came back," Jesse Callahan finally said, his voice ragged from smoke and sleepless hours. Clara Boone nodded, her gaze steady. "I couldn't stay in Tucson, not when everything I want is here." Jesse's expression stayed guarded. "And what exactly is it you want, Clara?" The question cut sharp, but Clara didn't flinch. She had come too far to retreat. "You," she answered plainly. "I want you, Jesse. I want this ranch, the long days, Agnes Whitlow's warm companionship, even Diego and Martine's awful singing by the fire." A tremulous smile touched her lips. "I thought freedom meant standing alone, but these weeks taught me real happiness comes from belonging." He studied her closely, hope and caution battling in his eyes. "And what about Lydia's words? The gossip, the propriety?" "Lydia Mercer doesn't rule my life or my heart," Clara said firmly. "Yes, you saved me. Yes, you sheltered me when I was nothing but skin and bones. But what's grown between us since then, that's not pity, and it's not debt. It's something real." Jesse's hard lines softened. He reached across the table and took her hand, rough thumb tracing her palm. "When I found you under that cottonwood, I claimed you as mine because I was fighting to keep you alive. I never thought you'd become mine in another way, that I'd come to care for you beyond duty." Clara's heart soared. "And I never thought nearly dying would lead me to the only place I truly belong." Jesse stood and drew her into his arms. She saw the exhaustion in his face, the weight of the ranch etched deep, but also something more, fear and hope mingled. "Are you certain, Clara? This life is hard. Rustlers won't be the last trouble. Droughts, winters, solitude, it'll test every ounce of you." "I'm certain," she whispered, brushing her hand against his cheek. "I'd rather face storms with you than an easy road without you." His arms closed around her. "When I left you in Tucson, I thought I'd lost you for good. I've never felt so hollow." "You'll never lose me," Clara promised. "I'm yours, Jesse Callahan, just as you once claimed." A fierce tenderness flared in his eyes. Slowly giving her every chance to pull away, he bent and kissed her. Gentle at first, then deeper, as Clara melted against him, her arms around his neck. When they parted, both breathless, Jesse rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Clara Boone. Have for weeks, just too mule-stubborn to admit it. And I love you, Jesse Callahan, she whispered back, joy brimming over. Though I'll likely keep calling you Jesse. He chuckled low. Wouldn't have it any other way. Spring of 1876 brought new beginnings. A sturdier barn rose from the ashes just in time for calving. The rustlers, Jed Crow, Hank Dobbs, and their gang were rounded up by Marshal Seth Carver and locked away. And on an April morning, with desert wildflowers carpeting the fields, Clara Boone became Clara Callahan. The circuit preacher wed them beneath an arch laced with blooms. Agnes Whitlow wept openly, while Diego Cruz and Martine Cruz coughed suspiciously as they wiped their eyes. I take you as my own, Jesse vowed, voice carrying across the small crowd. To protect, to cherish, and to love for all my days. And I take you as my own with all my heart, Clara replied, her eyes shimmering. The celebration was modest, but merry, filled with fiddle music and laughter. Later, Jesse led Clara to their cabin, expanded now with a new bedroom and sitting room he'd built over winter. On the porch, he drew her close, happy Mrs. Callahan, happier than I ever dreamed, Clara smiled. He kissed her tenderly. That day in the desert, I thought I was just doing my duty. Turns out I was finding my future. And I never knew weakness could lead me to such strength, she murmured, fingers tracing his face. You fed me back to health, Jesse, but you've filled my soul too. His smile softened the lines of his rugged face. Come inside, wife. Night's turning cold. He swept her into his arms and carried her across the threshold. Clara knew with certainty she had found her true home, not in walls of wood and stone, but in the heart of the man who now claimed her not out of duty but out of love. 5 years later, in 1881, the Arizona sun cast long shadows over the yard as Clara Callahan stood on the porch, watching her husband ride in from the south pasture. Even after half a decade, the sight of Jesse astride his horse still stole her breath. Mama Papa's home. 4-year-old Ella Callahan, named in honor of both Mary Boone and Agnes Whitlow, darted past her mother, braids flying. Clara smiled, one hand resting on her rounded belly, where another child, Luke Callahan, stirred restlessly. Jesse swung down in one fluid motion, catching Ella in his arms and spinning her until she squealed. There's my little wildcat! Did you help Mama today? I made biscuits and fed the chickens all by myself, Ella boasted. And I practiced my letters just like you said. That's my girl, Jesse, said proudly, his grin lighting the yard, as Clara's heart swelled with love for the life they had built together. Jesse Callahan kissed his little girl's forehead before setting her down, his eyes softening when they met Clara Boone's on the porch. And there's my beautiful wife. Clara made her way down the steps carefully, one hand steadying her back as the baby shifted. Welcome home, husband. How was the drive? Jesse crossed to her, kissed her lips gently, then rested his hand against her belly. Went well. Diego's taking the herd on to Tucson tomorrow. His smile widened when he felt the baby kick. Seems somebody's mighty eager to meet us. He's been restless all day, Clara said, covering his hand with her own. Jesse raised a brow. Just a feeling, Clara answered with a knowing smile. Jesse slipped his arm around her waist, guiding her toward the house, while Ella skipped ahead of them. Boy or girl, he said, as long as the baby's healthy and you're safe, I'll be the happiest man alive. The ranch had flourished in 5 years. What began as a humble spread with a single cabin and a few hundred cattle had grown into a thriving operation. Their home now boasted 4 bedrooms, a big kitchen, and even a small library filled with books Clara had sent for from back east. A bunkhouse sheltered 5 ranch hands, and at the edge of the property stood a schoolhouse where Clara taught Ella and the neighbor children. The railroad had finally reached Tucson, bringing new markets and steady cattle prices, though the land was slowly yielding to progress. Inside, the smell of beef stew and fresh bread welcomed them. "Letter from Mrs. Whitlow," Clara said, as she set Jesse's hat on the rack. The older woman had moved west to California 2 years before to live with her daughter, but still visited every summer. "She'll be here next month. Says she won't miss welcoming this baby for the world." Jesse chuckled. "That woman would cross a desert barefoot just to hold a newborn." "She says she's bringing Ella a surprise from San Francisco," Clara added. "A pony?" Ella asked, hopefully, eyes shining. Jessie ruffled her hair. "I doubt Grandma Whitlow could smuggle a pony on the train Wildcat. Now go wash up for supper." When Ella dashed off, Jesse pulled Clara into his arms. "Tell me." "True, how are you feeling?" Clara leaned into his strength, whispering, "Tired, my back aches something fierce. But happy, Jesse. So very happy." He kissed her forehead. "On the ride home, I kept thinking about that first day. 5 years ago, I found a woman half dead under a cottonwood and called her mine because I had to. Didn't know she'd end up owning my heart completely." Tears welled in Clara's eyes. "And I had no idea the cowboy who fed me slowly and claimed me out of duty would become my whole world." His hand cupped her cheek. "Any regrets about turning down that school position in Tucson?" "Not a one," she said firmly. "This, our life, our home, Ella, the baby, that's everything I never knew I needed." "And you?" she asked softly. "Any regrets about taking in a half-dead stranger who upended your bachelor's piece?" Jesse's laugh rumbled warm and deep. "Only that I wasted so much time pretending my heart hadn't already chosen you." Their moment was broken when Ella burst back in dripping water from freshly washed hands. "I'm ready for supper and starving. Just like your mama when I first met her." Jesse teased, earning a playful swat from Clara. Later, with Ella asleep and the house quiet, Clara stood at the window gazing at the starlit desert. Jesse's arms wrapped around her from behind his hands, resting protectively over their unborn child. "What's on your mind, sweetheart?" he murmured. Clara leaned against him. "I was remembering what it felt like to be truly hungry, not just for food, but for belonging." She turned to face him. "You gave me that. You fed not just my body, Jesse, you filled my soul." Emotion flickered in his eyes. "You saved me too, Clara. I wasn't living before you came along, just existing." His kiss still made her knees weak even after 5 years. She marveled at the path that had carried her from a starving woman in the desert to a wife, mother, and partner in a life built with love and grit. She had once been weak and silent with hunger. The cowboy who found her fed her slowly and claimed her as his out of duty. But what grew between them, the love, the family, the partnership, had turned survival into abundance. As Jesse led her to bed, his touch tender yet fierce, Clara knew with certainty she had found not just shelter, but home, not just safety, but love everlasting. In the wide Arizona territory, with challenges still to come and dreams yet to be chased, Jesse and Clara Callahan had discovered the truest treasure of all, a life built together, never again hungry for what truly mattered. If this story has touched your heart, I invite you to stay with us to discover more true tales of the Wild West. Stories that honor resilience, tenderness, and the spirit that God placed in those who blazed the trail. Subscribe, share, leave your thoughts in the comments, and join us once again to journey across this untamed land. Thank you.